Coming up, it's playoff time. We'll sort through all the matchups with help from the forum's Tom Mix and KWSN Radio's Craig Mattick.
Plus, Jay and I look ahead and make our picks on the best games of the week, and it all starts right now on Varsity Sports.
And how is everybody doing? Alongside Jason Andera, I am Jay Elson. Well, the regular season officially in the books, Jason. That means it's playoff time, and I know this is your favorite time.
It is. You know, between North and South Dakota, we've got games almost every night of the week, except for Wednesday and Sundays, from here through another, 10 days in a row.
Absolutely. Well, before we get into those playoff games, let's start with a look back at what happened last week in that final week of the regular season. It's our South Dakota Rewind, and we're going to begin with arguably the most anticipated matchup of the regular season. Sioux Falls, Washington won a slugfest with Roosevelt, with Brock Walker's 21-yard field goal lifting the Warriors to a 10-7 double overtime win. Now, the loss added insult to injury for the Rough Riders. They lost their quarterback, Jet Thune, to a broken foot on the first series of the game. His replacement, Torin Devricks, did come on to score the game-tying touchdown in the second quarter, but there wasn't much more offense to be had against that stout Warriors defense. Washington, meanwhile, which clinched the top seed for the 11 AAA playoffs with that victory, was led offensively by senior Chayton Fitzsimmons, who carried 35 times for 148 yards and a touchdown.
I'm excited. I mean, we just locked in the number one seed for the state tournament, so now we got a lot of momentum going into it.
O'Gorman got the offense going and shut down that Lincoln passing game to come away with a 33-7 intra-city win. Hunter Thompson got 2 picks on defense, while Luke Fritsch, Dodie McQuinja, Antonio Casiello, and Jack Peary each scored for the night.
The defending 11 AA champs got back on track just in time for the playoffs. Yankton closed the regular season with 3 straight wins, including Thursday's dominating 28-0 shutout at Harrisburg to overtake Pierre for the number 1 seed. Tanner Frick paced the Bucks' attack, carrying 7 times for 112 yards and 3 touchdowns.
Sioux Falls Christian clinched the first playoff berth in school history with a 16-8 win over Tri-Valley. Keegan Van Egnen scored both of the Chargers' touchdowns in the big win.
You know, we needed a close game. We haven't had very many close games this year. And we've been in games where we've either won by 20, 30, 40, or we've been in games where we've lost in overtime against Madison. But we needed a tight game, and we needed to be able to come out on top to know that we could battle.
Scotland played host to Cologne in the week's top 9-man matchup. Chase Mock scored twice for the Highlanders, and that would prove to be the difference. Cowboys did have a chance to win on the last play, but the ball slipped through the receiver's hands in those wet conditions, and that allowed Scotland to hold on for a 13-8 victory.
I'm going to give it straight out to my coaching staff and my players. They gritted it out. Hats off to Cologne. That's a heck of a ball club, and I'm just straight out guts. These guys we had a good game plan. We worked hard at it all week, and it was just 2 great teams battling out, and I'm giving it to my coaching staff and my players.
In Tuesday night playoff action, the DeSmet Bulldogs avenged a regular season loss to St. Mary with a big touchdown run by Broderick Poppinga with just 16 seconds left on the clock on a 4th and goal. The Bulldogs win 42-38 and now advance to play Harding County on Monday in the 9B quarterfinals.
Parker also pulled out a road victory as they visited Coleman Egan on Tuesday. Pheasants used the Landon Lieberman to Zach Anderson connection for 3 touchdowns in their 36-26 victory. Parker will now travel to Oneida to take on Sully Butte.
We were fighting and scrapping for every yard, every inch that we got tonight. I thought our kids responded to a playoff situation. A lot of them never been in a playoff game. Had a lot of fun, got to come out and get a victory.
We felt like we had to win this one to get it going again, and I feel like we can go a long ways in the playoffs.
A week after being ranked number 1 in the state, Bismarck High was fighting to earn a spot in the postseason. Find out how they fared after this.
Varsity Sports on Midco Sports Network is presented by Mitchell Technical Institute, Shields, and Farmers Union Insurance Agency.
Welcome back. Well, much like in South Dakota, Jason, the 2 biggest classes in North Dakota wrapped up their regular seasons last week on Wednesday night. We're going to recap that for you now real quick here with our North Dakota Rewind. It's not often that Bismarck High faces a must-win situation in the final week of the regular season, but the Demons, who were ranked number 1 in the state just 2 weeks ago, had to beat Mandan just to earn a spot in this year's postseason, and they did it in convincing fashion. Bismarck scored 9 touchdowns 6 of them from Jackson Ford on their way to a 62-39 victory. The Demons, now the number 4 seed in the West, Jason. That's their lowest postseason position since 2002.
Hard to believe, but still a team to beat. Let's move to Minot and Dickinson, who were battling for a WDA crown last week. It was the Magicians who came out victorious with a 24-0 shutout. Minot now clinches home field for the next couple of weeks, and that was their first WDA title since 2007. In the game, Austin Nagel led the way with 163 yards on the ground.
Thanks to the Magi, West Fargo extended its winning streak to 7 games with a 44-0 thumping of Fargo South. That was the Packers' 3rd shutout of the season and the 5th straight game that they've scored at least 40 points. So with all things considered, it's no surprise that West Fargo is heading into the playoffs as the number 1 seed from the East.
Yeah, it's big. Our defense in the past is just, Packers have always had a good defense. It's kind of like a tradition that they have, and it's kind of big that this year we're getting some better offense going, and it's a big improvement from last year.
Fargo Davies extinguished any playoff hopes for Fargo North with a convincing 24-0 win. Ty Jochum ran for 154 yards and 2 scores, while quarterback Tanner Boyanowski threw for another 122 yards. Davies now will head west to play Century for a big rematch from that opening season clash.
That is a tough draw right out of the gate for the Eagles. Let's take a look at some playoff results, Jandy, now. Class 1A, they got underway Saturday on October 24th, and not a lot in the way of surprises.
Yeah, those top 4 seeds had the week off, kind of to rest up and see who they'd play. And out of the rest of this field, nothing big for upsets. You did see Velva Sawyer and Hazen going at it, and it's kind of unusual to see Hazen out of the playoffs so early.
It is. In the 9-man ranks, 2nd round took place on Saturday. The powerhouses moving on.
The powerhouses are moving on, exactly. You had Richland and Cavalier, 2 highly ranked teams, and it wasn't that competitive of a game. Richland played really well, and Linton and Hankinson, maybe the best game of the week. 2 strong teams moving forward, but that's Linton that earns the right to keep playing in the playoffs.
One upset to mention there, Richardson Taylor Hebron over Mohall Lansford Sherwood, and Jandy predicted
and you
that
agreed.
Upset. I did agree. I'm not going to lie to you. But some good 9-man games, some good ones coming up. We're going to cover those in just a little bit. We're going to make our picks for some of this week's best playoff matchups coming up a little bit later on. But before we do that, we're going to get some extra postseason insight from the Forum's Tom Mix. This is Varsity Sports.
Varsity Sports on Midco Sports Network is presented by Mitchell Technical Institute, Shields, and Farmers Union Insurance Agency.
Some big playoff football games coming up in Class 3A in North Dakota, Jason, and we're going to get to all of these games that you see here for Friday's episode of Varsity Sports Live. Again, that is going to air at its normal time, Friday night at 10:30. Highlights, analysis, post-game reactions, all that coming your way once again here on Midco Sports Network, Jason. But anything in particular that you're excited about with these?
Exactly, yeah. One thing I'm excited about is AAA gets the spotlight. The other classes play Saturday, but AAA has some great matchups. It's going to be interesting to see that East versus West. We haven't played East versus West games since the first couple weeks of the season. A lot has changed since then. Everybody knows that the West dominated early in the season. Can they keep that trend going now that it's the playoffs?
Let's dig a little deeper into the North Dakota playoff picture. Joining us on the phone, Tom Mix from the Forum of Fargo Moorhead. And Tom, let's start in Class AAA and specifically the top team in the East. West Fargo might be the hottest team, or at least one of them in the state, but they've got a tough first-round matchup against Bismarck. How do they plan to attack a Demons team that beat them earlier in the season?
Well, I think it starts defensively, and it really comes down to the fact that that team has been playing very good defensive football the whole year, really. Guys like, Chase Pakin and Brandon Metz and Habinaman Simon are going to have to be the guys who lead the effort. They're the defensive front for West Fargo against the Demons, because Bismarck is a team that they have a rich football tradition, and so does West Fargo. So these are really 2 teams that you thought, well, maybe they'll meet later in the playoffs at the beginning of the year, but now they're meeting in the quarterfinals. So there you go. I mean, they have the personnel defensively to match up with Bismarck, and I think that's where it's going to be, where the game is going to be decided for West Fargo.
Well, the West has been stronger than the East in cross-regional play this year. Does that trend continue into the playoffs?
Yeah, it's funny because the whole year it's favored the West, but really with these playoff matches, and like I said, with the wrinkles that are added to these, like the Davies Century, getting both teams getting new players back, to me that's going to be a whole different game. And that one's going to be interesting to watch and see how both teams react to the new personnel. The last time that they played each other was, I mean, you might as well throw that first game out the window, really, when you think about it. But I really think that you could make cases for all 8 of these teams, which is pretty interesting to really, I mean, it's been a very even keel year throughout the whole year in 3A. So you never know how it'll all play out here, but I really think it'll be a split, and I'm not sure how that split will happen, which teams will win, but if I was to guess how it's going to go, I think there'll be 2 teams from the West and 2 teams from the East.
All right, Tom, I know you've seen Richland play this year. Do you think they have what it takes to beat a team like Thompson?
I do, and they did find a way to beat Hankinson to get the number 1 seed. They found a way to get that bye, and then their reward was to play Cavalier, the defending state champions. So last week they really responded to the challenge and got a big win. And you better watch out for these guys like Jake Island, Brady Hean, and Trevor Flaw. They're really the reason why they're making a deep run in the playoffs. Island is 149 carries for almost 1,500 yards rushing the ball. He's found the end zone 25 times. That's a lot of factor right there, and you're getting it from one guy. I think they have a really good chance against Thompson, and the common denominator is both of these teams have beaten Cavalier this year, so we're going to have to see which one's the better team this weekend, but I really think that Richland has the personnel to get it done against Thompson and move on to the semifinals.
All right, again, Tom Mix from the Forum of Fargo-Moorhead. Let's take a look now, Jason, at the quarterfinal field in all 4 classes. The most interesting game to you in AAA is?
I've got my eye on that Dickinson, West Fargo, Cheyenne. Cheyenne, of course, their first time being this far, being this competitive of a team going against Dickinson, another team. Unfamiliar territory for them. So which team will react? Which team will gel and maybe get something going in this class?
How about AA? Which one stands out to you?
You got that Beulah-Wahpeton game. We touched on it a little bit earlier, but Wahpeton, maybe if things go a little different during their season, they're a top-level team.
Park River Fordville Lankin, the defending state champs in Class A, Jason. They've had an impressive year to this point. They draw Northern Cass an 8-1.
Yeah, and the Jaguars have been really had a tough schedule this year and have fought through most of it unblemished. Just that one loss on the year. How do they prepare for a team like Park River? It's going to be tough for them. It's a huge ask to play against a team that caliber.
We see a rematch of a couple of powerful 9-man teams, Linton HMB at Shiloh Christian.
Well, we knew that Region 3 would be tough in 9-man football, and it's proven to be true. Linton, HMB, doing a great job, and Shiloh Christian just keeps on mowing teams down. Second chance for Linton. This one's going to be on the road, maybe a little bit tougher for them.
All right, well, stay tuned for that. Look forward to another fun weekend of high school football up there in North Dakota. Well, as we mentioned earlier, Yankton enters the postseason as the number 1 seed in Class 11 AA in South Dakota, but are the Bucks really the favorite to repeat? KWSN's Craig Mattick will give us his thoughts on that and more after this.
Varsity Sports on Midco Sports Network is presented by Mitchell Technical Institute, Shields, and Farmers Union Insurance Agency.
You're watching Varsity Sports on Midco Sports Network. Go!
The South Dakota High School football playoffs officially kicked off on Tuesday night with 11B and 9-man action. The rest of the first round will commence tomorrow. We plan to hit a bunch of those games for this week's episode of Varsity Sports Live, which again will air on Friday night at its normal time. But these games all taking place on Thursday, Jason.
And of these Thursday night lineup, I think you see some of the typical first-round games you see, especially in 11 AAA, where the top teams are just a lot better than those bottom 4 teams, and you see some of those. We'll get you highlights of those, but a couple we're interested in. Brookings at Harrisburg with a rematch of an overtime game just 2 weeks ago. T gave Madison some problems just a couple weeks ago, and they have a rematch. And then you've got Lennox and St. Thomas More. That's going to give us a good litmus test just to see either how good St. Thomas More is or maybe how good Lennox is.
Absolutely. Well, there aren't a lot of guys that watch as much high school football as this guy right here, but KWSN's Craig Mattick is one of them. He joins us now in studio. Craig, first-round games in Class 11 AAA aren't usually that compelling, but this year's 4-5 matchup looks to be pretty interesting. Do you think Brandon Valley could avenge that earlier loss to Lincoln?
I think they can. Last time they met, it wasn't that long ago, a few weeks ago. Lincoln did win that game against Brandon Valley, but there was a number of times Lincoln's drive started deep into Brandon Valley territory. And with Brandon Valley, I just think the weapons they have right now, I think that Brandon Valley with Wickersham and Sorensen and Grody and Grage and Waltner, I think Brandon Valley have enough weapons where they could sustain some long drives and make it pretty difficult for Lincoln, who came off a tough loss against O'Gorman last week.
All right, well, let's move to 11 AA now. We've talked about how crowded this field has been all season long. Do you think there's anything from these contenders that makes you think one of these teams might be able to separate themselves during the postseason?
I like Pierre. I like Pierre all the way. I think they are the better team in Class 11 AA. You look at Yankton, they had some injuries early on. They get the top seed, but I just don't know if they may make it back to the Dome, but I think that Pierre is the top team in this class. Harrisburg has had some injuries. I think they're going to have a tough time with Brookings. If Brookings can just run the ball like they did against Sioux Falls Lincoln, Brookings is going to be a tough team to beat.
Yeah, they are going to be tough out. Gerald Maxwell, certainly one of the difference makers in that class. Now, in 11A, the Madison Bulldogs bring a perfect record and a number 1 seed to the dance. Craig, who do you see, though, as their fiercest competition at this point?
I think it's going to be the teams that they'll probably meet in the playoffs to get to the Dome. One's going to be T area. Madison was at T here not too long ago. There were a lot of mistakes made by the Bulldogs. T feels pretty confident, though. They know they can play with them. That's going to be a very interesting first round, but I think Madison will be able to win that. And then it would be maybe Sioux Falls Christian, a team that they went overtime with. But, first Sioux Falls Christian has to get by Belle-Fourche. I think they will. I think Madison has the toughest road to get to the Dome.
All right, well, we're going to ask you to look ahead a little bit here again. Are there any teams in these top 3 classes that you might think have an upset or two in them?
In the 11A, I think some people think Sioux Falls Christian could be, because even though the schedule only had them play only a couple of 11A teams, I think Sioux Falls Christian could be a team that could get to the Dome. I think there's a lot of confidence with the Chargers. In Class 11AA, I think it's Pierre. I'm thinking Pierre Yankton maybe for a possibility for the championship there. And in AAA, I think Washington and Roosevelt are still 1-2 in this class. O'Gorman has not been challenged in the last couple of weeks. They had the great win with OG, but it's going to be a great semifinal matchup. OG, Rosie, and then Brandon Valley and Washington. I think it's going to be a great semifinals.
All right, well, thanks for your time today, Craig. Well, we've set the stage for you. That means it's time to share our thoughts on some of this week's top matchups. We'll wrap things up with our first round of playoff pick'em next.
Varsity Sports on Midco Sports Network is presented by Mitchell Technical Institute, Shields, and Farmers Union Insurance Agency.
And welcome back to Varsity Sports, as we do every week. Going to wrap things up with another round of Pigskin Pick'em, a playoff edition of Pigskin Pick'em. And I like the fact that, Jandy, we're going into the postseason neck and neck in the overall standings. Should be a fun way to close this out.
Exactly. It really, a lot of weight goes toward how we do on our upset picks from here on out. So far this year, we've had the exact same amount of upset picks correct.
And I have cooled off. I had a little bit of a string going in that department, but I did not get it last week. Well, Jandy did. That is the reason for the 3-point discrepancy in favor of Jason. 4 games to pick, Jason. Let's start in 11 AAA, that 4-5 matchup we talked about a little bit earlier with Craig Mattick. Sioux Falls Lincoln at Brandon Valley.
Lincoln, obviously the 2-time defending champs, know what it's like to play in big games. They believe they can do it, but last week, man, I had a chance to watch them. They just fell flat in the passing game. You know that Brandon Valley has been watching a lot of tape on these guys, and I think there's ways to hold down their big guys, their big guns. Not enough big stars for Sioux Falls Lincoln. I'm taking Brandon Valley.
I like the Lynx as well. They're 3-1 at home so far this season. Only loss was to O'Gorman way back early in the year, September 11th. Lincoln, meanwhile, 1-2 in true road games. They played 5 of their games at Howard Wood Field. So this is a little bit different animal for them. I like Brandon Valley to avenge that earlier loss. 11 AA, Brookings at Harrisburg, another 4-5 game.
Brookings, another team that, a few things bounced the other way, and their record looks a lot different than the losing record it is right now. I think that they have what it takes, and they're going to focus on the ground game. Devin Coughlin can manage that team, and Gerald Maxwell will hit a couple big ones and beat up that line. They got to take care of business against that big Harrisburg line. Of course, the injury to Kane Kittleson doesn't help Harrisburg. I'm taking Brookings.
Yeah, give me the Bobcats as well. I think Brookings felt like they let one get away from them. They had a couple touchdown lead against the Tigers a couple of weeks ago and watched Harrisburg come and take that game away in overtime. Again, I think that injury to Kittleson is huge. Harrisburg not the same team without him running the offense. So I like Brookings to get the win here. In North Dakota, AAA, good one here. First round matchup, just unfair, honestly, to both of these teams as Bismarck has to travel to West Fargo.
It's really hard to take anything from the regular season matchup. It seems like eons ago when these two matched up, and Jay Gibson treats the out-of-conference games a little bit differently than he definitely treats the playoff games. I think the Packers are ready to go with Genova in the backfield along with Tyken, and the way Creighton Fowl is playing, I don't think anybody beats West Fargo until they get to the Dakota Bowl.
I like West Fargo as well. They haven't lost since that Week 2 loss to Bismarck. They've gone 7 in a row, giving up just over 7 points a game in that stretch. So I think the Packers are going to be tough to beat, especially on their home field. Now Thompson and Richland, a good 9-man game here.
Right now, Richland is playing on offense as good as anyone. Jake Eland is running the ball up and down the field. If Cavalier can't stop him, I have a tough time thinking that Thompson's going to be able to stop him.
That offense is awfully good. This is more of a gut feeling for me. I think it is going to be a shootout, but I think Richland prevails in that shootout. Finally, quickly, upset picks of the week.
Velva Sawyer pulled off a nice win against Hazen last week. I'm going to ride them for one more week, taking out Bishop Ryan, a team that's been up and down this year.
I like it. The 9-man ranks, the quarterfinal game, Mott Region over Hettinger Scranton. Rematch of the top two teams from Region 5. The Wildfire did drop a 46-30 decision to the Black Devils on October 2nd. I think they get a little payback here in the playoffs when it matters.
All right, let's see if it happens.
Well, all right, that is going to do it for us for this week. For Jason Andera, I'm Jay Elson. Bring it back here for Varsity Sports Live on Friday night, a playoff edition